Hi, everyone. Well, my guest today has been on before, so it's always a pleasure for a guest to return. Her name is Linda Clement. Welcome back to the show, Linda.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's great for me too. And I just want everybody to know that Linda kind of stepped in at the last minute, which I really, really appreciate. Now, when you were on here before, you talked about raising parents.
Yep. Yep. This elevated a little bit.
So we'll talk about that a little so people understand what it was all about. There's some new viewers.
Yeah. I started my company in 2002. I looked into being a life coach and then decided to do the niche of parenting because it really was my passion. I'm absolutely on a mission to help parents avoid passing on their childhoods, really. For the parents who are cycle breakers, who are trying to stop the continuous, my great grandmother did it to my grandmother, to my mother, to me, and I'm not doing it to my kids. For all the parents who say at somewhere around 8 or 9, I refuse to do this to a kid of mine, and then find themselves in the midst of parenting their kids and going, my mother's voice just came out of my mouth. So I help good parents become great parents before they become grandparents.
Very good, because it is hard when you're in the middle of it, right?
Yes, and it's amazing how we recorded that stuff as children, and when those two brain cells touch because something reminded it just comes right out of your mouth, and it's almost uncontrollable. And it's very confusing. Like I vowed I wouldn't do this. What am I doing? and it's often one thing to say I won't do that. It's something else entirely to find the whole range of what I'm going to do instead.
Oh yeah. Oh, that's a good point, right?
Yeah, because it's not so much, I'm just not going to spank my kids. Okay, that's nice. And when they are doing things that are irritating, obnoxious, dangerous, sassy, bratty, persistent, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
What are you going to do when they are doing things that are dangerous? Or are you just going to sit there and say, oh, don't do that, honey?
Yeah.
80 times because they're not listening?
Right.
And then you understand why your parents snapped and said those things, because those were what they had recorded in their childhood in similar situations.
Right. It's kind of interesting because I like to watch. I'm a TV watcher, and I watch some of the reality shows, the Real Housewives of whatever, Spuzum, let's say. And I notice a lot of those children they misbehave, and they don't get. Now, I don't know if it's because there's cameras on them that the parents don't really discipline them. Like, I kind of don't get that. Do you think that would be different because there's cameras on them all the time?
I think kids get used to the cameras being around and they stop noticing. I think the parents are ineffective because the cameras are on them.
Right.
And they might be, grabbing them by the shoulder and shouting into their faces all the things that they heard when they were 7. When the cameras aren't on them. But when the cameras are on them, that's when they're standing there being very ineffectual because they don't know what to do instead.
Right.
They don't know how to talk to their kids in ways that are more effective. They don't know how to understand their kids' development levels so that they can create the environment so that the kid can succeed.
Right.
Like, they just don't know all that stuff. So it's the adults who are paralyzed by the cameras. Because it's one of the funny things that I say to parents quite often. If you parent as if somebody's watching, you will find yourself behaving very differently than if you parent thinking nobody's watching. But you can't parent with nobody watching because somebody's always watching you. And unfortunately, beyond the fact that it's your child and they're recording it, your very worst critic is watching you.
Right.
And you won't let you off the hook for any dumb excuse.
Yeah.
So parents need to find the skills and the information that they need to have in order to be able to live up to the standards they've set for themselves. Right. Because otherwise they just do get more and more and more frustrated, or they just give up entirely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting because, like, with my parents, it was you just do. They told you to do something and you just did it. You didn't question that. My kids questioned me. And I didn't have the answers.
Well, and when you say that, you're talking about probably after you were 4.
Yeah. Right.
So what happened to you before you were 4 is that you were conditioned from one method or another to know that asking questions after you're told to do something isn't safe.
Right.
So of course you did what you were told. You didn't want to set up the conditions for your kids not to feel safe around you. And you still didn't have any other way of handling them. So you tell them what to do. They answer you with, I don't want to do that right now. Or why do I have to? Or why are you the boss of me? Or something, whatever those are.
Yeah.
And you're standing there faced with no more information than you had when you were 4. Like, okay, now they feel safe enough to talk back. How do you get them to go to bed?
Because I say so, darn it.
Well, exactly. And you know, of the worst of the worst excuses for anything is because it was me asking.
Yeah.
Like that is the absolute worst, because then anybody else in a position of authority or close relationship can literally override their boundaries because it's me asking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's a terrible way to condition children. That's not a good idea.
Sure.
So most of what I teach is finding and identifying your own triggers so that you stop being triggered by what your kids are doing, because it's not their fault they managed to poke the button that worked. You know.
Yeah.
Ooh, that one lit mom up. I'll do that one again. That's fun. I'm gonna try and figure this out. Does it work in the daytime? Does it work in the nighttime? Does it work when other people are around? Does it work when we're alone? Pure scientists, children are. They're just trying to figure out the world.
Right.
So we need to figure out our own triggers so that we stop reacting badly in that automatic way that we learned as kids. And we need to learn much, much better communication skills than we have in our culture. Even the sort of, I've been to counseling and I understand that I should use I messages when I'm talking to people, doesn't really work very well. And it isn't very good communication. It's much better than shouting at people and telling them that they're horrible and that they should feel terrible about themselves because they've done something wrong. It's better, but it's not very effective.
Okay.
So lots of parents in this sort of gentle parent space will find that they just feel hamstrung. I can't, won't do that. And this doesn't work. And I take them over here where it does.
One of the things I hear people say a lot is the grandparents are better, like they're much better with their grandchildren than they were with their own. So what has changed? What makes the difference?
One of the things that makes a big difference is that grandparents don't take their grandchildren personally. Some do. Some grandparents are not better, but some don't take their grandchildren personally. So it's not a direct reflection on them how their grandchildren are. So I need you to behave right now so I feel like a good person isn't part of the equation anymore. They've also relaxed and realized that the stuff that they were super tense about when their kids were 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 or whatever just didn't matter that much. So they can relax and say, you know, the kid can make a mess when they're 3 and they won't still be making messes like that when they're 22, because they won't be 3 when they're 22. Like the kids are going to grow out of being little immature kids.
Right, yeah.
And what they mostly need is an example of how to be a mature, responsible adult. They can't be told to be a responsible adult, and they can't be coerced into being a responsible adult when they're 3, because they're 3. And grandparents have that perspective and parents often don't.
Okay. Yeah, you know, one of the things I always think about is like people stress about certain things about children, but I think like toilet training or whatever. And my comment is, well, what adult do you know that isn't toilet trained? You know,
who's not paralyzed from the waist down or whatever.
Yeah, or now into that area in their life or that place in their life where everything is, you know, starting to fall apart and they don't have control anymore. But there is depends. But there's that thing, people do grow up or grow out of or mature and are able to do some things, right?
Toilet training is my favorite example too, because I didn't toilet train my children. Strangely, they use the toilet regularly, but I didn't train them, because when I looked into what was actually involved in being able to use a toilet on purpose by choice, as opposed to babies who just go, I knew that there's a bunch of internal stuff. Like they have to be able to perceive the sense of fullness that precedes their body reflexively emptying. And that's not something you could train.
Right.
You can't train somebody to perceive something in their body. You can talk about it around them, but you can't teach that, and you certainly can't train it.
Okay.
The next thing they have to be able to do is communicate that need effectively with enough lead time to get into position and undressed enough before their body reflexively empties.
Okay.
That you also can't teach
Right.
because you don't know how long it is.
Yes. Right.
They have to figure that out internally. The other thing they have to be able to do is once they're in position, let go on purpose. And that's often very difficult. And it's very different for peeing and pooping. Like that's one of the reasons why a lot of kids pee potty train way earlier than they poop potty train.
Okay. Yeah.
Because it's very different. To be able to do that on purpose is very different than the body reflexively doing it.
Right.
And when we step in and say, I'm going to teach you how to do this, or I'm going to train you how to do this, and all we're looking at is they either did or didn't produce pee in the right place.
Right.
We're not actually teaching them what it is they need to know. And in my experience, kids who are trained have hundreds of more, they call them accidents, but I think they're kind of inevitables because they haven't actually trained the internal parts of what's involved in it. They've only trained the behavior.
Right. Okay.
And when all you look at is the behavior, you're not looking at anything underneath the behavior, like what's causing it or what's underneath it or what's required for that behavior to be inevitable or easy or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Behavior is the least informative piece when you're talking about what kids are capable of and what they are doing.
Right.
So we'll often attribute adult thinking to kids' behavior.
Yes, true. Yeah.
Like you meant to do that. It's like kids don't mean to do anything. Kids are trying to figure the world out. They don't have any idea what's going to happen.
Right.
Until they're 7, they don't know that dropping the ball will end up with the ball going down every time.
Ah, okay.
They're still exploring that. They meant to do it. They don't know. They had no idea what was going to happen.
But I was just interviewing somebody earlier and we're talking about seniors on computers and sometimes how we learn things by accident. And I guess that's kind of the same thing with children.
It really is. And kids learn things experientially. They try stuff and they iterate it. Like they do this thing and then they try doing it slightly differently and then they go back and do it that way and then they do it this way and then they do it another way. And then when you watch kids play, they're often not giggling unless something genuinely surprises them. They don't look like they're having fun.
Right.
Like it doesn't look, they're concentrating. They're working really hard at this. The one that freaks parents out the most is when they're working really hard at getting your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then they do something, truly vicious to their sibling or whatever. And then they suddenly have that great smile of relief and the kind of, got it. And that's when parents are like, oh no, I'm making an axe murder. It's like, no, the child has just gotten what they really wanted.
Right.
And they've just figured it out. And now they're relieved and happy about it. And, and their sibling is crying and maybe missing a finger.
Or 2. Yeah. One of the things that people used to compliment me on my children, they said, oh, they're so well behaved, the teachers, whatever. And I used to sometimes think like, what is the difference from them, the way they behave at home and the way they behave outside of home? Maybe it's somebody's house or whatever, like
let's do it. That's actually easy to answer because let's call back to your personal experience of when you were a kid, you just did what you were told.
Right.
And when your kids were young, they didn't. The reason you just did what you told is because you knew not doing it was dangerous.
Right.
And your children trusted you. So they knew that questioning and not immediate obedience or whatever was safe for them.
Okay.
That's the primary difference between kids with other people and kids at home.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
They don't know them. They don't trust them. And they instinctively know that those strangers have no vested interest in their survival.
Ah.
So they don't believe, no matter what is told anywhere near them, that those people are safe to defy, to talk back to, until they're in grade 5 or 6, which is often when kids' behavior goes off the rails in school as well. Because that's when they find out about children's rights and feel big enough and strong enough to be able to fight back. But they act it all out at home because they know that at home they're allowed to express themselves and to be themselves and to have their emotions and to explore freely.
Right. Yeah.
And exploring freely makes a mess.
So now you've been doing this for a while, quite a while. Have you made any changes in the way you approach whatever it is, the parents or whatever?
Yeah, I started out thinking you guys need tactics. You need a toolbox, you need to figure out all the, when they do this, do that, and then it'll be better. And then I realized that I didn't do very much of that with my kids. I mostly watched what they were doing, tried to figure out what it was they needed, helped them when I could see what their goal was.
Right.
Like, they were trying, a great story about a friend's kid. He was trying to figure out how to make a grilled cheese sandwich in a toaster. Don't do that. Don't do that.
No.
And he tried a bunch of different ways, and he's beside himself. He's like, I can't think of any other way to do this, after he lit it on fire for like the fourth time. So, and he was convinced that he would be able to, but he couldn't figure out how to.
Mm.
So when you can see what a kid is trying to do, he wasn't trying to light the toaster on fire. He wasn't trying to make a mess of the kitchen. He wasn't trying to wreck the toaster. He wasn't trying any of that. He's just trying to figure out how to make a grilled cheese sandwich in a toaster. Turns out you just don't. But he was trying, and he didn't know that there was no way of doing this. He just assumed that that's how grilled cheese were made, because maybe he'd never seen it done or something. I don't know.
Right.
Or it seemed logical to him. I don't know. But when you can see what your kid's trying to do, then you can help them not make messes or light the toaster on fire by pointing out the physical reasons why it won't work. The butter is going to melt down onto the element, and it's going to light on fire. It's going to burn the outside of the bread before the cheese melts. The cheese is going to melt down, not against the bread. Gravity will win. Let's watch the cheese melt down.
Yeah.
Like, there are reasons why this isn't going to work. There's reasons why we make cheese, flat instead of vertical. When you can see what your kids are trying to do, you can help them reach their goals more effectively without interfering with them or taking the tools out of their hand or anything, but by giving them information they didn't have before.
Right.
And now I realize that one of the things that I do the most effectively is not take the tools out of the parents' hands, but give them information they don't have. Like, I think we talked about this the last time. Toddlers who are just learned to walk do not simultaneously learn how to follow a moving target. So you'll often see parents who don't know that, because what you don't know, you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrated out of their minds at the mall or the beach or the park or something, where they keep saying the kid won't come, without realizing the kid can't come.
Okay.
They're walking ahead, and the child can either figure out where to put their foot or where they're going, but they can't do both at once yet.
Wow.
So they freeze in terror because they don't know what to do, and their people are walking away. The parents stop and turn around, and the kid's like, good, they've stopped. Now I can follow them. The parents are like, yay, they're moving, turn around and walk away again. The kid freezes again. So they're effectively driving each other bonkers because there's one piece of information they don't know. Human children do not learn to follow a moving target at the same time they learn to walk. And if they know that, they just go and take the child by the hand peacefully and walk away, with no stories about how it is you just don't want to leave the store, or you just don't want to leave the park, or you're just being stubborn or a brat.
Right.
So half of what I do is giving people information about child development and what kids cannot do until they have the brain parts for it. And the other half of it is teaching people to talk more effectively.
That is so cool. I love that. Now, do you have a website, or how can people get a hold of you?
I do. I'm on Instagram and much more on Facebook. My Facebook profile, just Linda Clement, .733, I think is my number, is my Facebook profile. I'm on Instagram at Raising Parents Inc. with little dashes under, like underscore between the words.
Yeah.
And my website is raisingparents.net.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to end it there. But I just want to say that thanks, Linda. I mean, it's so informative. It's so interesting, even though I don't have children to raise anymore. And, when I'm listening to you with the explanations and how it all makes sense when you know.
Right? It all makes sense when you know.
Yeah, for sure. So everybody, you've been listening to Linda Clement. I'm going to put her website on if you want to get a hold of her, if you need that help, especially, if you're in that stage where you're raising your little ones, you want to do a good job. We all want to do a good job. Nobody has children to say, I want to be a bad parent. So
yeah, I'm trying to make an axe murderer. How do I do this?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So so thanks everybody for listening. Be kind, and I don't say be kind. I like to say be nice. So I don't know why those words came out of my mouth, but same difference, people. And peace out, everyone. Thanks, Linda.
Thank you.
A sense of community, Chilliwack's a place to be. A sense of community where you're free. Rolling through the mountains, rolling through the valley, rolling through paradise with me. It's multicultural, you're sure to see it all. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see. Come party in the park, go dancing after dark. Chilliwack's a place to be, you'll see.